Hey everyone, thank you so much for being here. Before we kick off this week's episode, just a quick ask. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell to make sure that you never miss an episode, never miss out on any of the strategies and tactics that we're sharing to help you continue charting your own path to freedom. And if you'd like to go deeper with any of this, we've launched a free Facebook group, which you can join at pathtofreedom.com/group. And we've linked that in the show notes to make it easy for you to find. All right. Thank you again for being here. Let's drop in to the episode. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Path to Freedom podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jim Stevenson, and Jim is the founder and CEO of the Bletchley Group. Jim may also be the best accent that I've had on the podcast so far. But Jim and I have had a chance to have a couple of conversations, leading up to recording the podcast. And, Jim, I've really enjoyed the chats that we've had so far, enjoyed getting to know you a little bit. I know that I'm going to personally be able to learn a lot through our conversation today, and I have no doubt that the audience will as well. So with that, welcome to the Path to Freedom podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I've loved our conversations as well. It's been fun getting to know what you do, the podcast, your business. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to the chats that we've had.
We got introduced, and usually when I have a chance to have someone on the podcast that I've not ever met or interacted with before, I like to have kind of just a quick introductory chat, make sure it's going to be a good fit. And I think you and I talked for a little over an hour, and towards the end of it, we were like, shit, we should have just hit record, and that could have been the podcast. That was probably something that people would have gotten a lot of value from.
Yeah, I completely agree. I got a lot of value from it. It was great, kind of just to riff on some business ideas, the value of franchising, why it's a good idea for startups, for your first business. Yeah, I loved it. It was fantastic. We should have recorded it.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll start doing that in the future, just in case those intro calls turn into something that could be a little bit more than that. But I have the good fortune to have you here now again for a second time. So maybe start off by sharing with the audience a little bit about the Bletchley Group and what you and your teams specialize in, the types of clients that you work with. I also want to make sure we touch a little bit on your background kind of in more of the corporate world, because you've worked for some very large companies that, most of the listeners would recognize the names of some of these companies. So, you yourself have kind of been through a transition where you went from, high level positions with very large corporations to, now you're out on your own with your own consulting firm. So I think some of that would be relevant for the audience as well. But, to start, tell us a little bit more about the Bletchley Group.
Sure. Bletchley Group is essentially, we're a strategic advisory, and we're a consultancy firm which helps companies to find opportunities to grow. And that is very, very broad. Once you get into and I start explaining some of my background, you'll understand why it is as broad as it is. But it's everything from helping companies to get the right culture, to empower their staff, to the more tangible go-to-market planning, propositions for customers for what they do, to fundraising and M&A if they want to grow and expand. So it's a very, very broad range, which is why I like the term growth. We help companies to find growth, and that's what we ultimately do.
And I imagine with that, you work with a pretty broad variety of types of companies and clients.
Yeah, again, if you get into my kind of background of the types of companies I've worked with before, it covers everything. I've worked with Bacardi, launched the Guardian into the USA, a big retailer in the UK called Marks and Spencer's, News Corp. So my kind of background is a lot of technology, but technology enables pretty much everything these days. So yeah, I'm sector agnostic. Bletchley Group is sector agnostic. We come in, and a lot of what we do, because we are sector agnostic, it helps us significantly to bring a different perspective.
Yeah.
Um, a lot of the ways of working that started out in Silicon Valley 20 years ago, most other sectors are now just starting to catch up with. Well,
Right.
we've been doing it for 20 years, so we can
Yeah.
help a large legacy retailer to convert into being a much more nimble, agile organization. We can help a startup to understand that you no longer need to have a perfect product to get to market.
Yeah.
The process of testing and learning, the process of validate your product before you go there. It reduces the risk for all startups, for all small businesses, but it's just a smart way of doing things. And we can help with all of that stuff. So it's a really good way of using our broad experience, applying principles that we've found in different sectors into new sectors and helping.
That makes a ton of sense to me that, learnings from like your example of Silicon Valley and just, other industries, because, that tends to happen where in certain industries, certain things are just done the same way. And that's how we do things. But sometimes if you have, someone from the outside with a different perspective that's not been entrenched in, that certain industry for their entire career, they're going to have some really good ideas and some things that could be implemented that are still very applicable. So to me, that makes a ton of sense. You know, talk to us a little bit more about your background because the little bit I know about it, it's fascinating. I mean, for those listening, if you can't tell, Jim's from Scotland, right? Based out of kind of the Los Angeles area right now, but you've lived and worked all over the world and, worked for, as you mentioned, a variety of different companies. I mean, Bacardi being one of them that I'm sure most people would recognize. So, take us through kind of a little, explanation of your background, because I think that will, kind of set the stage a little bit for why you were able to start your own firm and help your clients today in the way that you are.
Sure. Well, given the fact that this is past the freedom, I'll start from why I started Bletchley Group,
Yeah,
and I'll give you that history, and then I'll move on to some of the things that I've done along the way.
sure.
Um, I became self-employed at the very start. The reason I made the decision to work for myself was I had been made redundant twice before the age of 30. And I was working for a company, and I spoke to a freelance guy who had come in to the company to work with us. And I said, don't you get worried that you're everything. You need to do the sales, you need to do the business development, you need to make sure your customers are happy. And he said, yeah, but the alternative is I work for a company and they can fire me tomorrow and I've got no visibility that it's going to happen.
Yeah,
At least working for yourself, you can control that. You can
yeah,
see that you've got no clients coming up or business is bad. You can deal with that. You can do
yeah.
something about it. It's in your control. And I love that. I love that freedom that gave me. And the reason I chose Bletchley out of all the names that were available was I loved the work that was done in Bletchley Park back in the Second World War.
Okay.
So it was where Alan Turing worked, the guy who created the Alan Turing test for AI, very relevant today. I think we're getting close to breaking his test. Um, but it was when we started using technology, but for the real business objective. It wasn't just cool technology. We need to achieve something. So there was an
Right.
objective there that we needed to use it for. So that was where Bletchley Group came from. My desire
Where
to,
was that turning point? And so first of all, I'll admit I had to look up what Bletchley Park was. I'm nodding my head as you're saying that, like, oh yeah, I knew I had to look it up because I did see that was kind of where you chose the name from, but it intrigued me, so I did a little research. But your point on this change to using technology for the actual outcome versus just, hey, this is cool or, makes things a little bit easier. Like, is there like a specific type of technology or a specific time that you would kind of point to and say that's where things started to shift more in that direction?
um, probably not. And the only reason I say that is probably more my personality. I like to be productive and I like to kind of see the value in the results that I achieve. So I wrote my first computer program in 1980. I am that old.
Wow.
Um, and it was cool, but it didn't do anything. And it was kind of like, that's cool. What do I do with it now? I mean, it's cool, it's done,
Right.
And it kind of was unfulfilling. And I wanted to do things that were of value and much more fulfilling to me and seeing a result. And that's where all of that kind of ethos came from was um, technology is amazing, but if you're not going to use it for a real purpose, then what's the point?
Yeah. And I almost feel like in this day and age, if you're not careful, you can, as a business owner, you can get bogged down by technology
Mm,
because there's number one, there's so many options, right? Like just quick example, my wife for one of our businesses was trying to implement a new CRM
yeah,
for just a portion of the business, right? She spent at least 6 months going and seeing demos of different CRMs and going back and forth with representatives. And, at the end of the day, I was finally like, Kelly, like these all do essentially the same thing. Like pick one you like and just start implementing it. Like you could already have this, fully up and running in the time that you've spent just
yeah.
researching all these different options. And I think it's probably tempting for a lot of business owners to incorporate all this different technology because there's, it's kind of bells and whistles, right? But at the end of the day, is it really helping you accomplish anything that you wouldn't be able to accomplish otherwise?
Yeah, completely, and I completely support that. Find something that you like, and when I say like, find something that does what you need it to do, and you enjoy using it. If you
Yeah,
have to fight with a tool, you're never going to use the tool.
great point.
But you constantly see on podcasts and on YouTube videos and things, people saying, "Oh, I've tried this technology and it was great, and here's a pros and cons." And then a month later, it's like, "And I've upgraded to this new technology, and here's the pros and cons." And it's like, "Whoa, I'm running a business here. I'm not updating my software every couple of months. I'm not even updating my software every 2 or 3 years. If
Right,
I've got a tool that is working today, it is a big decision for me to change it to something else." Not because the tools aren't getting better, but because I've invested so much of my time and the
yes,
cost to move from one to the other is so huge. Your
yes,
wife wasted 6 months of her precious time looking at the right tool. Use the best tool that you can find at the moment. Don't there's perfect doesn't work. As soon as you've got the perfect tool today, there's a new one on
be
Monday and
outdated a week later.
exactly, and it's
But yeah, I
done.
think chasing perfection is something that a lot of entrepreneurs are kind of prone to,
Hmm.
and it probably results in them. And I've been guilty of this myself, plenty of
We all
times.
are.
Trying to do enough research or do enough work before actually implementing something so that it's perfect. Whereas majority of the time you're going to be better off if you just start implementing it and then kind of figure it out as you go, adjust as you go, tweak it as you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think
I,
technology can just muddy the water with that because there's just so many options. You can get lost in it.
Completely. I'll tell you my cheat for that.
Okay.
I I find people that I kind of like who do similar things to me, similar kind of spaces, and I then go away and find the tools that they use.
Okay.
And if they're doing a similar type of thing to me and they've got a similar type of need to me, they've already done the research. I
Right.
don't need to do the research.
Yeah.
It
Why
might not be
reinvent the
perfect
wheel?
for me. Yeah, it might not be perfect for me, but it's good enough.
Yeah.
Let's get that, make the decision in a week, done deal, we're off and running.
Yeah.
And it's just a nice cheat. It saves me doing lots of research and Google searching this and looking at 15 different websites to compare the pros and
Yeah.
nah,
It's a
it's
black
just too
hole for your time when you really start going down, some of those those research rabbit holes. And, I think your point is great where it's kind of an opportunity cost evaluation, right? Where, hey, I've got this in my business, it's
yeah,
working and getting me the result. There's this new option over here. And technically, yes, it may be better, but is the benefit of me taking the time, energy, and effort to make the switch, is there going to be enough payoff for that to be worth it? Or am I better off just staying with what I have and that time
exactly.
can go into more productive things? We'll get right back to the episode in just a minute, but if you've been considering business ownership, if If you're already a business owner looking to expand and you're curious about franchising, I'd love to connect with you, answer any initial questions that you have, talk about a specific franchise, and detail the exact process that I use and have taken hundreds of people through to help them understand franchise ownership, find the right franchise for them, and conduct the necessary due diligence. Click the link in the show notes if you'd like to schedule a free, no obligation strategy call. I look forward to talking with you. And now back to the episode.
I mean, the other point to add in there is, for the last 20 years, I've been a huge advocate of if the technology touches your customer, it can become a unique selling point for you. So you want to make sure that that's good, but you also want to make sure that you can customize it enough to make it your experience for your customer.
Yes.
If it's a back end system, if it's your payroll system or your banking system or your CRM system, there is no unique selling point. There is no value add. It is purely a cost to your business that you want to make sure you're being as efficient and as streamlined as you possibly can. So get a cheap one that does what you need. You don't need bells and whistles. It's not a unique selling point. It's not going to add value to your business. That's just a commodity IT system. Get what you need, make it work, run with it. Don't change it every 10 minutes, every 2 weeks. If it touches your customer, if that's the type of business you're in, it's a unique selling point at that point, and you do need to be able to customize it for your experience for your customers.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very smart distinction to make, right? The customer facing aspects of the business, especially technology, probably worth spending a little more time, money, and effort to make sure that it's exactly what you want and giving that customer your exact experience. And like, you know, a little bit about my background and you know, my kind of focus on franchising, and you know, my wife and I still do, but have owned numerous franchise businesses over the years. And like, I've seen franchise brands do that really well. We're talking about the customer facing side of technology where it's very customized to the brand and to the exact experience that we wanted that customer to have. And then one of the brands we owned, it was kind of an off the shelf technology with little to no customization added after the fact. And, you know, you could just tell from the customer's experience, it was not the same, and definitely not as good as it could have been.
Yeah.
And it makes a big deal. That makes a big difference, especially if you're in some sort of a business where, you know, you're offering a premium product or service, right? Where you're not trying to compete on being the lowest cost option on the market.
Yeah, completely. And if you're in a premium world, then the customer experience is everything.
Yeah.
And you need to make sure that that's what differentiates you. You look at really high-end supercars. You get to choose everything, literally everything on that car.
Yeah.
And if you're paying those types of money, then you'd expect that.
Sure.
You go into the local Toyota dealership and buy a Camry. Yeah, you're getting a Camry. And that's fine. I'm not dissing on the Camry. It's an awesome car. It's great. It's one of the best-selling cars in the world.
Probably run forever if you change the oil regularly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you're not expecting that level of customization because you're not paying $200,000-$300,000 for a car.
Yeah.
So it's appropriate for what you need. And sometimes you want that basic, just give me the functionality I need. It does everything I want it to do. Let's run with that. But for me, I think when you get into customer service, you do want that customer experience to be the one that you've designed, the one that's going to set you apart from your competitors.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know that I've ever really sat down and thought about some of those things as clearly as you just talked through it. But I think those are definitely valid points for any business owner, regardless of the size of your business or even, you know, an aspiring business owner to think about, right? So it sounds like you got to a point where you realized that yes, there's risk in owning my own business and being out on my own, but you viewed that as less risky than the alternative of working for a company that, you know, at the end of the day, they're going to do what's right for their bottom line. And if it's a publicly traded company, that's their responsibility, right? Is to do what's best for the bottom line and the shareholders. And if I think a lot of people either never make that connection or they find out the hard way, right? That's the case because they're a victim of it. But it's not always, that a company eliminates a position or lays someone off because they're not performing well, right? A lot of times it's not just a reflection of, are you performing as expected or better than that? So was there anything that kind of, I guess led to you flipping that mental switch and saying, all right, I understand starting my own business is going to be risky, but I now view this as less risky than what I've been doing,
Yeah.
working for corporations. Hey everyone, we'll be right back to the episode, but one quick note, success doesn't happen in a vacuum. So if you'd like to learn more, you want to go deeper and interact with like-minded people, I'd love to have you join the free Path to Freedom Facebook group. You can join by going to pathtofreedom.com/group and become a part of the Path to Freedom community. All right, back to the episode.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I thought about it as risk or less risky.
Okay.
I thought about it more as you've heard the saying bet on yourself.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
I viewed it more as something that I could control.
Got it.
I could
Yeah.
control the chairman and the CEO of a big corporation in a
Yeah.
boardroom saying my entire division that I'm working in is now no longer relevant. Where you're all redundant.
Yeah.
But I could control whether I went out and gave my clients value. I could control whether I was expensive or cheap, whether I was delivering something or not. And a part of that was back in Scotland, back in the day, I had the opportunity to work with IBM, and IBM was IBM Europe. And it was pretty much you showed up to the office with your luggage and your passport, and you'd get sent to some far-flung European country that you'd never heard of. And I kind of thought, well, if I'm going to do that, I want to control that. I
Right.
want to decide that I want to go to this, and I very much used that as almost a way of traveling all the way through Europe that clients paid for.
Yeah.
So I didn't want IBM to decide where I went. I decided the clients that I was going to be targeting. I decided the countries and the places and things like that. So I did extensive work in Switzerland. I love Switzerland. So I've worked with 3 or 4 big companies in Switzerland. I got to spend a lot of time out in Switzerland, and they paid for my flights and for my hotel room. And I eventually moved from having a hotel room to a mini little apartment that they paid for.
There
And
you go.
it was awesome. But again, going back to freedom, that gave me freedom to do what I wanted.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the whole purpose of it.
Yeah. 100%. Be more proactive in terms of putting yourself in a position to have more control over your livelihood, your financial upside, as well as your time and your freedom. And yeah, I think that's what it's all about, for the vast majority of people. I mean, everyone's motivations are at least slightly different, but I think at the end of the day, it really does all boil down to freedom. Um, so it sounds like so maybe I'd kind of misunderstood. So the work that you did for Bacardi and some of these other large companies, that was after you'd already started your own consulting
Yeah,
firm. You were not
I
working for them as
yeah.
an employee. Okay.
No, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was
So,
freelance with all of those guys. So yeah,
so
it was
so you kind
through
of
Bletchley.
came to this realization, it sounds like earlier in your professional career than many people do.
Um, yeah, possibly. But I also think that I was fortunate because I set my company up when I was 30.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
unlike most people that was 30, I had just gone through a divorce. I didn't have kids.
Yeah.
I had the time to focus on my career and not worry about kind of the risk element as you mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
I was reasonably secure. I had my own home. So kind of life was okay at that point. It was just that I was in Scotland and I wasn't doing the job that I really enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
So I managed to transition. I managed to move to London. I managed to work with some amazing companies doing some really cool work. And then, yeah, the what's the word, the commitments that we have in life and our private, then they all came later. But I
Right.
managed to kind of move into this much more flexible way of working. I think I told you last week when we spoke initially, that there's something called the FU money that
Yep.
I have, which is great. And I got that within 4 or 5 years. And for the listeners, it's purely when you have enough money in the bank that if you have a problem client or a problem customer, you get to say FU and know that you're not going to be destitute, know that you're not going to be homeless next week. You've got enough money to survive those. I just can't work for you as a client. And that
And that's
gives you
freedom.
that's huge
That's a
freedom. It gives you
huge form of freedom as a business owner when you get to the
completely,
point where you don't have to take every single customer and every single dollar that's available to
completely
you because I don't care what business you're in, you're gonna have problem clients and customers that are just not worth the hassle and the headache and the grief that they're going to cause.
completely. And when you get to that point, it's different for different people in different industries, and it goes with your cost of living and whether you've got a big monthly expense or a low one,
Hmm.
whether you're selling consultancy or whether you're selling a widget. I mean, all of those things come into it. But for me, the first part of getting to freedom is having your own business and then getting to that level that actually I don't need to take your crap. Yeah. I created my own business to have freedom, not to take someone else's crap.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that was a huge milestone.
It is. I mean, I can remember, in the first franchise business my wife and I started when we kind of got to that point. And I mean, we still talk about it to this day. And, in a franchise, one of the things if someone's evaluating a particular franchise opportunity, considering investing in it, you're going to have the chance to speak with other franchise owners that are already in the business as part of the
Yeah,
due diligence that you are able to do and absolutely should do. We call it validation. And so we have the chance to talk to other people that are considering this particular franchise, and we just share our experience and answer questions. And my wife was doing one of those calls last week, I think, sometime, and I just kind of was in the room in the background and overhearing parts of it. And she was telling this. It was a husband and wife couple that were looking at,
yeah,
starting something, and she told them that look, you'll get to a point where your business is stable enough, your financials are stable enough, but you've also had enough experience in the business and kind of learned to, see some warning signs of what a problem client
yeah,
looks like in this business. And she's like, I guarantee you will get to a point where you turn business away because it's not going to be worth actually moving forward and doing the deal with them.
yeah, completely, completely. I remember having a call with a client, and my wife walked past and because it was on speaker, and she said, "That guy's a dick." And it's kind of like, actually, do you know what? My desire to service clients, my desire to give a good quality service, make it all work, I had completely missed the kind of flag of he's a dick.
Yeah.
I didn't fire him there and then. I still worked with him for another 3 or 4 months so that I could professionally transition out. Where
Right.
he's like, yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's it. That's it done. Yeah, that's it done. Yeah, I'm not working with you if that's how you're going to be. And but so we all need that kind of external thing. But being in that position of just kind of knowing, yeah, this isn't. And the couple of times when I have worked with clients and fired clients, um, the start of it's always been the same. I've kind of not recognized the red flag.
Hmm.
And it's only with experience you start to learn what those red flags are for you and your business and
Yep.
where your boundaries are. But yeah, the couple of times it's kind of failed miserably. It's like, yeah, I chose not to kind of see that red flag. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just don't do that
Well,
anymore.
I
I,
don't
I
know about
just don't.
you, but I've kind of chickened out like midway through trying to fire a client,
Oh
and
yeah,
then kind of pulled back the reins a little bit, like started walking it back a little bit. And like that's
yeah.
something I've had to get better at, right? Is just being more direct and not beating
Yes.
around the bush, because with my consulting work, I mean, it's a little bit different in the sense that I don't sign a contract with the people I work with. They don't pay me
Yeah,
directly. The franchise companies that I work with pay me basically a finder's fee or a commission, right? It's very
yeah,
similar to a headhunter.
yeah,
So, there's no contractual relationship. And I've always had the mindset of, look, I'm willing to spend time with anyone that is genuinely curious and wants to learn more about franchising, even if you're not
yeah,
in a financial position to buy a franchise today, even if you're just, you know, not there, even if the conclusion is, hey, I learned enough to say franchising is probably not the right avenue for me. I've always tried to take that. But to your point, the more you do it, the more you start to pick up on red flags and, people that are just at the end of the day, they're kicking tires. They're never actually going to take any meaningful steps forward. And so it's one of those things. I've gotten better at it, but in the beginning it was hard, right? Because you're just trying to get
yeah,
started. You're trying to have enough people to work with. And then you get to a point where you're a little more established, but you haven't yet quite learned what all those red flags are. And so that's kind of learning the hard way. But yeah, there's been once or twice where, I went into a meeting with the intention to essentially fire them, and I walked it back a little bit. So I think
yeah.
there's probably for a lot of people some learning on that side of it too. Hey everyone, we'll get right back to the episode, but I wanted to quickly share a free resource with you. If you're curious about franchise ownership and want to learn more about how countless people, including myself, have leveraged franchising as a way to create more freedom for themselves and to take control of their livelihood, I've put together an ebook. It's called Franchise Wealth Creation, and it's the perfect starting point for anyone that's just curious to learn more about this whole franchise thing and how I've helped hundreds of other people navigate all the steps involved in understanding and researching franchising. So click the link in the show notes, fill out a short form. I'll send you the ebook. I think it's a great starting point if you're curious at all about learning more about franchising. All right, let's get back to the episode.
But like you said, for me, the beauty of it is the fact that once you've learned, it means that you can focus all of your time on the clients that are going to value what you do. You can focus
Yes.
all of your times on the clients that actually want to be there, want to work, want to be successful. And that just makes my day, at least, way more. I go to bed with a smile on my face because I know that I've helped someone that genuinely wanted help,
Yeah.
genuinely wanted to be successful, as opposed to just kicking tires or
Yep.
wanting someone. I have had clients before that just wanted me to agree with them so that they could go to the board and say, yeah, I spoke to Jim. Jim said it's a good idea, so let's do
Yeah.
this.
Jim signed off on it. So
And it's like, no, I'm frustrating as I can be, and I can be frustrating. I will give you the best professional advice I can give. And if it's not what you wanted to hear, then I'm happy to talk about it. But
right.
I'm not here just to tick a box so that you can go away and do whatever vanity project you want to do with Jim said it was okay. It's
Well, you wouldn't really be doing them any real
no, no,
service or adding any real value if you weren't. But to me, that piece of it kind of goes back to freedom too, right? Because it's kind of
yeah,
like an 80-20 thing, right? Where 80% of the headaches you have are probably coming from the 20% of your most problematic customers. So if you can kind of eliminate that, so much of the stress and headaches go away. And so the work you're doing is more enjoyable. You're probably not working as hard, right? Because you're not putting as many fires out, or at least the work you're able to focus most of your time on doesn't feel as much like work. And so I know I've seen that. Like I had to kind of learn that lesson the hard way, with my consulting business, because I used to do a lot of like outbound prospecting, right, where I'm trying to cast this wide net and rein people in. And then the thing that where I kind of flipped the switch was, if I start to feel like I want this more than they do, that's probably a good indication, in the type of consulting that I'm involved in, that this is not the best use of their
yeah,
time or mine.
yeah.
And I
I have a
had to
little,
learn to get comfortable with, looking at like my CRM and seeing less people in my pipeline, right? Which was kind of a comfort thing, right? Like, oh, I got X number of people, but half of them are not really doing anything or ever going to do anything. Like, let's shrink that down. Now my life is not as hectic. I'm not chasing people. I'm not, having to do all these things that really feel like work. Now I just get to have great conversations with people that are genuinely interested in exploring franchise ownership and everything else you look for in a business, KPIs, ultimately the revenue and all of that has gone in the right direction since I started, prioritizing some of those things, but it's kind of counterintuitive.
It's usually counterintuitive. I'm not a very good sales guy. I'm just not. I don't like promoting myself, put myself out there, and I'm the greatest. Come and play, sign here, and we'll all do great stuff. But I had a mentor when I first started the business, and he was the one that explained to me it's better to have one client that genuinely wants to find a way to work with you
Yeah.
than to have 10 that are thinking about it and maybe not, and we'll come back in a couple of months' time and we'll consider it, and I need to go and speak to these people. That's not the point of sales. It's absolutely not. Sales is to get you in front of the people that want to work with you, that
Yeah.
you want to work with, and sign that contract. But your other point earlier on, I have this saying. I'm happy to. I will have coffee with anyone. I'll chat to anyone. I'm happy to mentor people. I'm happy to support people through it. And while I work with clients, I always keep a couple of individuals that I kind of mentor along the way as well, just as a way of giving back. But I have this saying. I'm happy to help you, but if I'm doing more than 50% of the work, that's no longer help.
Yeah.
And yeah, there is some people that are kind of like, yeah, I want your help, but can you just do it for me? And it's like, well, that's really not me helping anymore.
Right. That's well, and again, you're not doing them any real service, right? You're only gonna hinder them long term because they're not learning how to do any of this themselves. And it's similar to, to me as I'm kind of advising someone through the process of evaluating and possibly buying a franchise. I can't make those decisions for people, right? That's
Yeah,
not my role. It's a big decision, right? Regardless of the dollar amounts involved, it's a big decision to, buy a business that's going to have an impact on your day-to-day life, your family's day-to-day life. And hopefully it's the majority of that is positive, but regardless, it's going to change your life. And not my responsibility or my role, and I wouldn't be doing anyone any real service to say, oh, this is the franchise you can buy. Now what I can do is give them kind of a blueprint to follow in terms of, hey, this is how you should really go about determining what types of franchises could be the right fit for you. I do spend a lot of time getting to know different franchise brands across, so I have knowledge to where I can say, look, these are some very reputable brands that meet the criteria that we've kind of worked together to establish would be right for you.
yeah,
And then it's up to them to go and do the due diligence with that brand. And I'm there to guide them through that and make sure they know how to go get the information that's going to allow them to make good decisions for themselves. But I've definitely worked with people over the years that, when you really boil it down, they wanted me to just tell them what franchise to buy.
yeah.
And that's, I would never feel comfortable doing that, but at the end of the day, that's not what's best for them at all. They need to be able to make the decision themselves.
It kind of feels like that it comes from a place of lack of confidence.
Yeah,
And
100%.
if you make the decision and it goes wrong, then I can blame you for it, as opposed to. And the whole reason I set up on my own and did my own company was if it goes wrong, it's my fault. If
Yep.
it goes well, I'm the one that will pat myself in the back and go away to the Caribbean and have a nice holiday.
Yeah.
But I have complete ownership. It is entirely down to me. I may ask you for your advice and your help, but ultimately the decision was mine. And if it goes badly, hey, I'll go and look in the mirror and think, that didn't. I'll probably call myself a number of expletives, and swear words, but it's down to me and it's ownership. You've got to have ownership, otherwise, it's never going to work. You're always going to be looking for someone else to make a decision or someone else to blame.
Yeah, one of the best books I ever read, and it's one I try to go back and read every so often, is Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink.
Yeah,
If you're familiar with that, such a good book, and one I would say every business owner should read. But so kind of getting back to Bletchley Group.
Yeah.
because I want to make sure the audience kind of really understands, where you're positioned to help. We've already kind of established that you're industry agnostic. Your primary focus is just helping your clients find ways to grow. If I understand correctly, when you first started the firm, you were kind of focused primarily on technology, but
Yeah.
over the years, you've broadened the scope, beyond technology. I'm sure technology is still, a big part of what you advise clients on, but so I mean, I'm curious, like, and I understand, it's different for every single client that you have, I'm sure, but what are some of the most common obstacles that's your clients run into that prevent them from taking their business to the next level? Are there two or three
Yeah.
common things that you just have seen over and over again?
Um, Absolutely. It very much depends on the size of the business for a
Yeah.
lot of those things. But the one thing that every business that struggles with is clarity of where they're going, clarity of what their strategy, not even their strategy, but their vision,
Yeah.
what they're trying to achieve. The number of companies that you kind of see and you go back to a presentation deck that they did 3 or 4 years ago, and it's like, that's a great company, that's amazing. How did you get from there to where you are today? Because there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
So very often it's not having that clarity, and that clarity just goes all the way through the company. The founder, the owner has lost clarity, so they're in the day-to-day weeds of just trying to make money, revenue, pay the salaries, and they've lost what they're trying to achieve, because they're in the business, they're in the
Yes.
weeds of the business.
Yep.
But then it also goes down because everyone that works in the business is kind of going, well, hang on, I'm not being asked to drive the business forward. I'm being asked to work in the business and just do the day-to-day tasks that I have to do. So that's probably the one single biggest thing that every business has a problem with, whether you're a global multinational, whether you're a small startup. Startups tend to be okay because they're new and they've only been going for a year. But as soon as you start to employ 20, 30, 50 employees,
Yeah,
then
that's where it gets trickier, right? The more people involved, for sure. I imagine on the vision piece, the more people that have some sort of an ownership stake, that's
yep.
that's harder, right? Because you got multiple people that may have different visions, and if they're not communicating on a regular basis to make sure those visions are aligned, they could,
Yeah.
um, because if you've got like two planes on a similar path, but they're each off by a degree, as they
It's
get
huge. Yeah.
further and further, they're drastically far apart from each other.
And then that compounds because, to
Yeah,
use your analogy of the two planes, you get
yeah,
two planes 1 degree each. But then this team here go away and hire someone that's on a different jet. So this one's kind of going that way because they're hiring
right.
in a different, and the new people that are bringing in are seeing it as a different vision. And so it just compounds itself. So having that clarity of vision is just core.
When I think to your point, if it's a startup with, say one founder, or even like I work with a lot of husband and wives that are starting,
Yeah.
a franchise together. One of them may kind of be primarily taking the lead while the other one keeps a job and supports in the background in the beginning, but probably easier in terms of having the longer term vision, right? But I still see a lot of people, and this is a lot of the work I do on the front end with people, is like, okay, you think you may want to buy a franchise. Why? Right. And like one of the hard things I had to learn was just to keep asking why, right? Because everyone's
Yeah.
going to give you the same kind of two or three canned surface level answers. I want more freedom. Okay, great. What does
Why?
more freedom look like for you?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Why? Why do you want that? And if you can get 6 or 7 layers into the whys, usually the dots start to connect for people a little better. But what I see with a lot of, and we've struggled with this in our businesses as well, you kind of look at things like, oh, well, I need to have a vision. Okay, that makes sense. But like, do I really need to write the vision out? Right. And then, oh, I make my first hire. Well, almost feels kind of silly for me and one employee to sit down and talk about the company's vision,
Hmm.
right? Like, I understand where that makes sense as we get a little bit bigger, but we're going to table that. We'll do that later. Right. And
Yeah.
so I think a lot of small business owners fail to put good structure in place that may not be entirely necessary in the very beginning when they're very small. But if that structure is in place early on, it's a hell of a lot easier to maintain it and actually use it
Yeah.
as the company grows, because it's very, very difficult once you've got 10, 15, 20 plus employees to then go back and try to add some of that structure.
Completely agree. I remember writing down my very first vision, actually for Bletchley Group, before Bletchley Group was even a thing. And what I found was really valuable in writing it down wasn't that I had hundreds of employees to share it with, but more it kept me honest. It
Yeah.
kept my vision as I kind of go. So as an opportunity came up, it's like I wanted, oh, that's not quite what I wanted to do, but the money would be good. But yeah, it's taking me off the wrong path. I'm going to say no to that opportunity and have the confidence that my vision is where I'm going. And that's what's going to get me out of bed in the morning. So I would suggest to those people, don't write it down for your first employee, write it down for you.
Yeah. Great point. Great point. Is there kind of any, tactical advice that you would give to your clients that are struggling with this issue? Or is there any particular, I don't know, system that you may recommend? And like, this question's coming from, I'm sure you're familiar with the book Traction by Gino
Yeah,
Wickman, and he's got, his EOS, entrepreneurial operating system. Like, I
yeah,
work with some franchise brands that, they try to kind of run that system, right? And when they bring a
yeah.
new franchisee on board, they take the franchisee through EOS training, and they, encourage them to operate their business that way. What are some of the tools or tactics that you're helping your clients implement to get past some of those common challenges?
To be honest, there's a couple that I use. The one that you've already mentioned, I think it's the five why framework. I think that's the genius framework because it
Yeah,
helps you
yeah,
dive into why you're doing things. So if I if I make some assumptions and go back to the scenario you mentioned of a husband and wife team looking to buy a franchise, you ask why, and what you get the husband saying is, I want to run my own business. And the wife saying, I want to be my own boss so I can spend more time with the grandkids
yeah.
or whatever it is. And suddenly you're getting this completely fundamental mismatch in what the objective is of the business. And it's not to say that they shouldn't go ahead, but at
Right.
some point they both need to be very clear on what's happening. So be clear on what the objectives are. Excuse me. And then as things are progressing, recognize that objectives will change. So be open to change, but also be open to communicate. And the communication is key. Anyone that's been in any relationship understands that communication is key, um, as much in a business as anywhere else. Sorry,
Yes.
I'm going to cough.
Yeah,
Oh,
but I,
excuse
I think your point of objectives changing is incredibly valid, but one that a lot of people probably don't even think about until it's already happening or has
me.
happened. Like, any of our businesses, that's been the case, right? The
And
objective in the very beginning is not necessarily consistent.
I'll ask you a question back because I'd be very surprised if this hasn't happened and you've not experienced this. When a couple that you've supported through buying a franchise, 5 years later, in one of their heads, the objective changed, but they didn't tell their partner.
Yo,
It
yeah, yeah,
happens all the time.
100%. And even, I mean, even even the objectives not being the same when we really start talking about it before they've even bought a franchise, like that happens. And again,
Yeah,
another lesson I learned the hard way, over the years, was like, assuming there's a spouse involved, they've got to participate in this process, right? Because a lot of times, and more often than not, it's the man, that the husband, that reaches out to me, and my decision, my money, my wife will support whatever I decide to do. And, we have a phrase in our industry, which is spousal ambush, because it happens all the time. Because,
I love
this
it.
macho guy that, doesn't need his wife's permission to buy a business, almost
Yeah.
every time the wife comes in at the last minute and nukes the deal.
Yeah.
Where she's like, "You're planning on doing what?" No. So yeah, both people need to be involved, whether both will play an active role in the business or not. But definitely interesting as we do kind of an in-depth consultation and really start trying to unpack some of these things, where the the answers they're each given are very different. And a lot of times, because I always do this via Zoom, and you can see almost like looks of surprise on one of their faces when the spouse starts answering. They're like, "Oh, that's different than how I thought you would answer that."
Yeah, no, completely. I find it fascinating from a human point of view and
It
a
is.
psychological point of view. But yeah, you've got to communicate, you've got to kind of understand what that is, and you've got to be aligned. And it's when those alignments start to miss, either at the start of the process or through the process,
Yeah.
that challenges happen. But when you get it right and when you're open and you're able to have that candid chat with your partner, your spouse, so that you are aligned, so that people are aware. I was speaking to a guy yesterday actually, um, and he's lost a big client out of his business, and he was feeling so alone. I probably shouldn't say this in case he hears the podcast, because he'll know who he is. But it's very common, not just this guy. He felt so alone because he didn't feel like he could tell his spouse, and if he
Yeah.
told his spouse wouldn't understand. And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, that's your business. That's cool. It's your business, but your business impacts on your life, and your life impacts on your spouse's life, and you've got to kind of be joined up. And it's very common. You see that all the time. That
Yeah.
it becomes a very lonely existence because I can't share the good stuff and the bad stuff. I can only
Yeah.
share the good stuff. But going
Yeah.
back to
That's
the franchise model, sorry, going back to the franchise model, I like the franchise model because the stresses of getting through starting up a business,
yeah.
a franchise takes away a lot of those initial early tasks. So it kicks you forward, it moves you forward quite quickly in that regard and helps and supports that decision making of where you're going and why.
It absolutely does. And to your point about, sometimes feeling very lonely as a business owner, a good franchise is really beneficial in that regard as well, because you do have this peer network of other business owners that are running the exact same business that you are, right? Meaning, chances are they have had the exact same challenges. They've had similar wins, similar losses. And, the most franchises are structured such that no two franchisees ever feel like they're competing against each other, right?
Yeah,
Through protected territories and things of that nature, right? So, most franchisors really try to, incentivize collaboration and, create cultures where the franchisees want to help each other. And it's, very much a rising tide raises all boats type of
yeah,
mentality.
exactly.
And that's huge, right? I mean, in the franchise that we've owned the longest, that's always primarily been my wife's business, right? I mean, she's the one that's, really done the work day in, day out. Any
Yeah,
success we've had is 100%, because of her. I know the business. We talk about the business a lot, but, she'll, if she's having a shitty day for some reason because of something in that business, like, she's gonna pick up the phone and call a couple of her other franchisee friends probably before she calls me, right? Because they're just gonna get it better than I
yeah,
do. Same as me, right? I've got other consultants that do the same type of work that I know, and we talk and we share best practices and we share wins and losses and give each other advice. Like,
yeah,
and there's a lot of nuances in my business. While my wife understands what I do and is pretty familiar with it all, I'm picking up the phone and calling one of these other consultants that's doing it all day every day like I am, to have those types of conversations. So that's invaluable if you can create that kind of support network, because it can get very lonely. And it's one of the things I'm sure that ultimately leads to burnout for a lot of entrepreneurs.
Oh, completely. I mean, just the stress of running a business is insane. The stress of running a startup, I don't know why anyone would do it. You have to be pathological in some kind of way. Whereas a franchise, and I help startups, I've done startups, but franchises they do kind of start you off further down that line. They take away a lot of the pressure of the tasks.
Yeah,
Um,
it's you've still got to do the work, right? It's kind of like we talked about your relationship with your clients. It's not your role to come in and do the work for your clients. Same thing with the franchisor franchisee relationship, but it gives you the ability to run faster, right? And it gives you the ability to really start focusing on building and growing the business without having to do all the heavy lifting of just putting the different pieces in place that need to be there in the beginning to even start operating the business. And that does save a lot of time. It can save a lot of money. um they're there to guide you and support you to hopefully prevent you from making mistakes that they already made and other franchisees have made
yeah,
before
exactly.
you. That's invaluable. So yeah, when and when it's done right, right? I mean, franchising's far from a perfect business model, and not all franchises are created equally. So, look, I know we've gone a little over on time, and
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
definitely want to be respectful of your time. I've got one other thing I'd love to
Sure.
kind of ask you, and maybe this would be a good way to wrap this up. And you know, I've enjoyed talking with you so much. I think it'd be great to have you
Likewise.
come on again in the future if you're open to it.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, anytime.
but maybe kind of leave us with this, right? So, we've talked about some of the most common challenges that business owners have when it comes to continuing to grow their business. A lot of my listeners are aspiring business owners, right? So, what's one or two pieces of advice that you would give to someone that's not yet a business owner but moving in that direction to set themselves up from the very beginning to not hit some of the speed bumps that are so common for most entrepreneurs when it comes to growth? We talked about vision and
Yep.
and communicating that vision. Outside of that, is there any other piece of advice that you would point to for the aspiring entrepreneur?
Absolutely. And probably the best piece of advice, it can be quite contradictory when you listen to people. People say do what you're passionate at doing. Other people are saying don't do what you're passionate at doing, do what you're good at doing so you can make money at it and you can service clients. And I kind of fit in between both of those. I think one, you've got to be able to service clients. So you have to be able to be good at what you do. But if you're not passionate about it, you're not going to get out of bed. You want to find something that you jump out of bed at, you do.
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate, and please don't tell any of my clients. What I do is more of a hobby than it is a business.
Yeah.
I love it. If
Yeah.
people didn't pay me, I would still do this because I enjoy it so much.
Yeah.
I get
Yeah.
out of bed every morning looking forward to what's coming next.
Yeah.
Most times. Once in a while, you get out of bed
Well, you're
thinking, oh,
always going to have
whatever.
certain
Yeah,
things that you're not crazy
exactly.
excited to do, but
But
overwhelmingly it's something you're excited.
yeah, isn't there the Japanese framework? I forget what it's called, the Ikigai or something like that, where you find what you're good at, what you enjoy doing, what people need, and what you can make money at. There is a framework
Yeah,
for it.
and find that kind of where it all crosses over.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the one piece of advice for me, if you're thinking about setting up in business for yourself, find that one thing that's going to get you jumping out of bed, so that when you do come across the tough points, when you do have a down period, when your clients are being difficult, when the money's not coming in as quickly as you expected it to, you still want to jump out of bed and do the same thing.
Yeah, that's such good advice because otherwise it's a recipe for burnout. No question. And when you kind of raised that question, I was real curious to see where you were going to land, because this is something I get asked about a lot, right?
Mm.
Should I go for something that I'm passionate about, or something that's just, a good cash flowing business? And I think my perspective's changed on this a little bit. Like, I grew up in the sector of franchising. That's what I always jokingly refer to as dirty, unsexy service businesses, right? Types
Yep.
of businesses nobody grows up aspiring to own, but they're needed. They can be very lucrative, and a lot of times they're in industries that are very fragmented, and most of the competition is small,
Yep.
unsophisticated, independent companies. So, anyways, I very much used to be of the mindset that, a business is a vehicle. And, if you can get the things you really want out of the business financially, time, freedom, all of that, then you're just going to have more time and more resources to spend all the rest of your time the way
Yeah.
that you want to. I've definitely evolved my view on that to I think pretty similar to you, like somewhere in the middle. I think I think so for all the reasons you said, you want to get into something that interests you, excites you, fires you up, because otherwise you're just not going to be able to get through some of the low points.
Yeah.
I think, however, I've seen a lot of people jump straight to the first business they're passionate about, and they skip a lot of the research and things that they should think through,
Mm.
before saying, oh, this is the right business for me. Because I think there's just other things you want to make sure line up
Yeah.
besides just the passion piece, right?
Completely, yeah, you're 100% right. I completely agree with that. And your example of the unsexy businesses, I get that as well. But for me, the passion isn't in owning an unsexy business. For me, the passion would be owning several of them and building a group of them and
Yes.
making sure that little empire is being. So that would be a passion for me, would be to grow the empire. The fact
Yeah.
that it's got unsexy business in it is irrelevant. It's the little empire that's getting me out of bed in the morning. The unsexy business is what's making the money.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's so many factors in there that you need to equate. Will people buy what you're selling?
Yeah.
Is it a valid business? Will I be living in a tent in the middle of the wilderness because I can't afford anything?
Right. But
There's
I'm
a
doing
lot.
what I'm passionate about, right?
Yeah, exactly. And for
Yeah, I
some
mean,
people,
that's it.
even that works. I mean, the number of people that you see on YouTube or wherever else it is, they're living in a van, and their only source of income is by having a YouTube channel saying to people, "I live in a van." Well done to them. If that's what makes
Oh
them
yeah,
excited,
and some
if
of
that's
them
what gets
are
them out there, go for it. It's
some of
awesome.
them are making a killing doing it. That's a whole nother like podcast conversation right there. But I will say, as we kind of wrap this up, because I know I've taken up a lot of
That's
your
okay.
time. Um, my wife and I definitely have learned that, right? Where like the business we sold last year was an insulation franchise, right? We did new construction, home renovations. There's nothing less interesting than insulation, right? But and then our other franchise that we're coming up on 6 years owning now is custom shelving and custom closets, right? Maybe a little more interesting, but still not like, you're not the most popular person at a dinner party when you're sharing what your business is. What we've really become passionate about, and I don't know that we knew this when we were getting into it, but it's building high performing teams, creating opportunities for people to make a good living,
Mhm.
that are willing to work hard, and providing a superior experience to our clients, especially in industries where the bar is set very, very low and expectations are very, very low. When we
Yeah.
can come in and wow somebody, because of the experience they had working with our insulation company, like those are things that we've, I think, over time become passionate about. Like I said, I don't think we understood that getting into it. It was more like, hey, these are businesses we think can, be very lucrative for us and help us achieve some of these goals that we're working for. But it's kind of turned into that.
I love that because any one of those three things we could talk easily for an hour on each.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
building high performing teams, that's amazing. And personally, I love the fact that you're helping people to live their life the way they choose to. You're giving them the income, you're giving them the stability that they would want. If they don't want to go away and buy their own business or create their own business, then you're giving them a genuine alternative, and that's really nice. That's amazing. That in itself is a passion. So
yeah,
while the business might
yeah,
not be exciting, the fact that you're helping people do live their best life is hugely exciting. So there's always something exciting you can find in any kind of business, any situation. But yeah, high performing teams. Yeah, let's have another hour on that. In fact, let's
Yeah,
probably
man.
have a
I
week
could
on that.
talk to you for hours. I know you're on the West Coast, so you've got a little more of your day in front of you than I do. So
Yep.
I need to let you get back to it. But quickly tell folks where they can connect with you, where they can learn more about Bletchley Group, and anything else that you're putting out in terms of content, resources, if anyone wants to learn more.
Sure. The best place to find me is at bletchleygroup.com. So BLETCHLEY group.com. Or I think I'm James Stevenson on LinkedIn. Feel free to come
Okay.
connect with me, chat with me there. And yeah, I'm happy to chat to anyone about anything. And if I can help, I will happily do that.
Awesome. Well, we'll link all that in the show notes to make it easy for
Thank you.
people to find. And Jim, truly a pleasure.
Likewise.
I've had numerous good takeaways in the conversations that we've had, and an hour and 20 minutes felt like it was 15 minutes. So would love to have you come back on the show some point. But thanks for everything
Absolutely.
that you're doing. Thanks for being here and sharing some of your expertise. We really appreciate it.
I loved it. Thanks, Wes. Speak to you soon.